It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please, won't you be my neighbor?
Hello. Today we're going to be talking about authenticity in the neighborhood, the legacy of Mr. Rogers. When selecting our case studies, we were very much intrigued and drawn to this case study because I think many of us were actually raised on Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and it was really unique to be able to really dive into his life and find out a lot of the things that we may or may not have known about him, but to really focus in on his morals and ethics. The first thing we had to do, though, was select a decision-making matrix. So for that one, we chose the four-way method. Now, the four-way method was given to us by the ethics professor from Viterbo College, Richard Kite, and he developed this decision-making method to promote different ways of thinking. As presented in our textbook and as we have seen in everyday life, there can be multiple ways of looking at the same issue. The example given to us in the textbook was a viewpoint of workers' hours being cut. That's going to be viewed in a different way from management side versus the worker who's getting their hours cut. While it may be necessary, that does not make it any easier for the worker themselves. So it's best to look at an issue from many different viewpoints. So each stage of this model is going to address one mode of the thinking. And these four ways of thinking are the truth and consequences, fairness and character, the advantages and disadvantages, also known as the pros and cons. And then we're going to wrap up with the solution and defense of our conclusion. In the first one we're going to look at, we're going to talk about truth. And when it comes to Mr. Rogers, there were four things that we need to look at with truth. The first one is going to be, what are the facts? And the facts are simply that Mr. Rogers brought an authenticity to his public persona as well as his private life. In fact, he was cited in the U.S. Supreme Court decision, which allowed Sony Entertainment to sell VCRs for time shifting, which is actually just recording programming to be able to view at a later time when it's more convenient for you. Mr. Rogers testified before the court saying, I have always felt that with the advent of all of this new technology that allows people to tape the neighborhood off the air, they then become much more active in the programming of their family's television life. Very frankly, I am opposed to people being programmed by others. My whole approach in broadcasting has always been, you are an important person, just the way you are. You can make healthy decisions. I just feel that anything that allows a person to be more active in the control of his or her life in a healthy way is important. Getting his program into the hands of children was something that he firmly believed about, and he did not care about his financial gains or motives from it. If they wanted to record his program and watch it at a later time, then that was totally their prerogative, and he was very outspoken to allow them to do that. The second one we look at is, what are the relevant laws? You see, Mr. Rogers always stood up for his beliefs, regardless of when or where that was. In fact, he's most famous for testifying before the U.S. Senate, advocating for him not to cut the public broadcasting fund. And he even convinced then Senator John Pastore, a very outspoken and generally feared and disliked senator, to fund public broadcast television. He's even quoted as saying in the Senate subcommittee hearing that he's never had goosebumps in a hearing before. And after talking to Mr. Rogers, whom he did not know at all for just a few minutes, said, sir, you just got your $20 million for public broadcast television. Even beyond that, when it came to things like racial discrimination or bullying or things like that, he always stood up for what he believed in. The third thing we look at is, what is the organizational or company policy? And on the set of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, that was always one thing: do what's right. Even when that decision may be unpopular, even when that decision is universally ridiculed, what's right will always be right. And the last thing we look at when we're talking about truth is the transparency aspect. And this is, what are the pertinent professional standards? And his professional standards was transparency. We are going to do what is best for children. Have we ever heard that story before? I know I have, especially in education. But when you operate at a transparency, you operate consistently on your morals and your ethics. And there's no need to hide things. Because too often than not, when things are hidden, it shows a lack of morals and ethics. The next aspect we look at is going to be the consequences, when we have to ask questions like, who is most likely to be affected? And this was an easy one. Millions of children around the world, generations of children grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It aired in 1968 and aired its final episode in 2001. So for 33 years, millions of children were able to tune in to the Mr. Rogers' Land of Make-Believe and to hear important life-affirming affirmations for themselves. How are they likely to be affected? Well, as we've already mentioned, he received $20 million of funding for public broadcast television. Many of his shows in the beginning, he funded out of his own pocket because he felt very strongly that it was important to get shows on the air that showed the good side of people and what could happen when you believed in people. He got sick and tired of the violence and the gunfire and things like this on TV, and he wanted to show the positive aspects of life. And lastly, we have to look at which solution will be most beneficial and least harmful to those affected. And what he always advocated for, and his solution to everything, is to promote civil discourse and self-efficacy. He told every single child that he ever met that he was proud of them and that they are best just the way that they are. And this is something he consistently did day in and day out. He answered every single letter that was sent in by every single child over those years of his television show, and he always ended every letter with, "I am proud of you." So now we're going to move it on to Grace, who's going to talk about the rest of the things, and then on to Lori to kind of round it out, and then I'll be back with a conclusion here in just a minute.
Thank you, Chad. Moving on to the third mode of thinking, which is fairness. In this mode of thinking, consider the perspective of the other party and strive for equality. Treat others with respect and design a fair process for resolving the dilemma. Respond to the following queries. Do the proposed solutions treat others the same way you would want to be treated? Do the proposed solutions treat everyone involved with respect and dignity? Are the proposed solutions motivated by goodwill? Do the proposed solutions enhance or diminish the autonomy of all involved? Fred proposed solutions that included the equal treatment of others. Fred was a pioneer in race relations and took a stand against racial inequality. He recruited Francois Clemens to play a police officer, making him one of the first Black men to play a recurring role as an authority figure on American television. Fred proposed solutions that involve treating others with dignity and respect. As well as promoting civil rights, Fred chose to not publicly condemn gays and lesbians. He would treat interviewers with dignity and respect and would reply to every letter he was sent. Fred proposed solutions were motivated by goodwill. Fred strove for transparency and vowed to be the same person on and off screen. He would reshoot scenes and agonize over every word and movement. He believed kids deserved his best effort. Fred proposed solutions that enhanced the autonomy of all involved. Fred's shows revolved around a variety of topics and speakers, both ordinary and difficult. The topics addressed in the show included those such as getting a haircut, the fear of being sucked down a drain pipe, coping with change, angry emotions, divorce, war, and caring for the environment. The fourth mode of thinking is character. This way of thinking highlights the person. Consider the motivation of the actor and the outcome of the act. Reflect on the following. Can the proposed solutions be enacted virtuously? Will carrying out the proposed actions make the agent more or less virtuous? Can the proposed solutions be implemented in a way that builds trusting relationships? Fred proposed solutions that could be enacted virtuously. Despite criticism and ridicule, Fred demonstrated many leadership qualities by defending the rights of minorities and gay and lesbian people. These qualities include courage, empathy, vision, and integrity. By carrying out his proposed actions, Fred was seen in a virtuous light. Fred received 4 Daytime Emmys, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, 2 congressional citations, and 40 honorary doctorates. He also had an asteroid named after him and was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. Fred proposed solutions that could be implemented in a way that built trusting relationships. His show addressed current controversial topics and ways in which they could be dealt with. He used his program to nurture viewers and encourage children to feel good about themselves. He would frequently tell viewers, "You are the only person like you in the whole world," and would sing the song, "It's You I Like," to reinforce this point. Moving on now to Lori to talk about the pros and cons.
Thanks, Grace. When reviewing the balance sheet of the four-way method, we look at the advantages, which are the pros, and the disadvantages, which are the cons, of the ethical dilemma. In this case, it is balancing kindness and love for children with the issues of the times, which is the 1960s. When making an ethical decision, we must review whether there is a moral disengagement, which is convincing ourselves that what is wrong is right. We need to review whether there is a partial disengagement, which focuses only on principles that support our position. If there is a moral or partial disengagement, it makes listening to others' point of view or ethical framework challenging. The advantages, the pros, of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Fred Rogers acknowledged the barrier to moral reasoning, which at that time was racism, by soaking his feet in a wading pool with a black man named Francois Clemens during an episode of his show 5 years after the Civil Rights Movement. Fred facilitated ethical group discussions by talking with the Senate Committee in 1969 on the importance of speaking to children, and he also talked with the Senate Committee about a song lyric about being mad. Fred incorporated a variety of ethical theories by defending VCR manufacturers that were being sued by TV executives because of copyright infringement and time shifting. Fred defended freedom of choice. Fred felt that people should be able to record a show using a VCR and watch it whenever they had time to watch it. So he defended freedom of choice. Fred addressed character when making ethical decisions. He showed character by not condemning gay people when conservatives wanted him to do so. Fred used ethical decision-making when making decisions by hugging Eddie Murphy, a skeptic who parodied him on the Saturday Night Live comedy show. So Fred showed an ethical decision to forgive Eddie Murphy and let bygones be bygones. The disadvantages or the cons in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, his disagreements and conflicting views. Fred disagreed with racism, lack of funding for public television, lack of freedom of choice, condemning gay people, and holding grudges against people who made fun of him. Fred was in direct conflict with the thinking of the 60s. The disadvantage for Fred and his viewers is that the executives could have canceled his show due to his views. The television executives could have replaced Fred with someone who agreed with the 1960s perspective. The viewers could have boycotted the show due to Fred's beliefs, causing the ratings to plummet, causing loss of money, and ultimately ending the show. Here's Chad to talk about the conclusion.
Thank you, Lori. Objectively speaking, no man or woman was alive ever to exhibit a higher standard of morals and ethics than Fred Rogers. For 33 years on his television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he confronted stereotypes, tore down racial barriers, and empowered generations of children to embrace the uniqueness of themselves and others. He confronted social issues head-on like racial discrimination, bullying, war, divorce, and other issues children faced. As we have mentioned, Mr. Rogers lived not only a transparent life, but an authentic one. He was the same person on set, during an interview, or on the subway. He lived the words he spoke. As an ordained Presbyterian minister, he also lived a Christ-like example that he sincerely believed in. He showed no hate or malice to others. He always focused on the other person in an interview or conversation, making it notoriously hard to interview, yet he enjoyed it simultaneously. In 1997, when he received his Lifetime Achievement Award, he asked, as he always did at public speaking events, to take 10 seconds of silence to think about people who helped him along the way in life, regardless of where that person may be. In 1999, when he was inducted into the TV Hall of Fame, he was inducted by Jason Erlinger. Jason was a person with quadriplegia who appeared as a child on Mr. Rogers' show. Before Jason could fully make it on stage, Fred was up on stage, greeted him warmly with a smile and a hug, 18 years after he appeared on the show. Fred greeted him like an old friend, which was how he greeted everyone. For 896 episodes, Fred Rogers sang the intro theme song every time he changed his shoes and jacket from a sports coat to a hand-knitted sweater that his mother had made, one of which now permanently resides in the Smithsonian Institute. In conclusion, Fred Rogers was a man of outstanding moral character, high ethical standards, and generally one of the most caring individuals to have ever lived. But please, don't take our word for it. Listen to his words yourself in his farewell address announcing his retirement in 2001, a mere 2 years before his passing, where 2,700 people attended, with millions more offering condolences to his wife of 52 years.
You know, it happens so often. I walk down the street and someone 20 or 30 or 40 years old will come up to me and say, "You are Mr. Rogers, aren't you?" And then they tell me about growing up with the neighborhood and how they're passing on to the children they know what they found to be important in our television work. Like expressing their feelings through music and art and dance and sports and drama and computers and writing, and invariably we end our little time together with a hug. I'm just so proud of all of you who have grown up with us, and I know how tough it is some days to look with hope and confidence on the months and years ahead. But I would like to tell you what I often told you when you were much younger. I like you just the way you are. And what's more, I'm so grateful to you for helping the children in your life to know that you'll do everything you can to keep them safe and to help them express their feelings in ways that will bring healing in many different neighborhoods. It's such a good feeling to know that we're lifelong friends.